Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Ajay Koma Abigail. We're having lesson 1 today, lesson 1 for LIS 109. The topic for today is channels of communication in African societies. We have 3 main objectives for this lesson. The first one is to define communication. The second one is to identify the elements of communication, and the third one is to identify traditional channels of communication in African societies. First of all, we have to know what communication is. Communication is the process of expressing and exchanging information, thoughts, ideas, and feelings. As I'm talking to you, I'm communicating with you. As you are listening to me and responding, you are also communicating with me. Communication is the process of giving, receiving, or exchanging of information or ideas so that the message is completely understood by everybody. Communication is not complete until the message is understood. The second objective we're going to look at is the elements of communication. There are 5 elements of communication. The first one is the sender. I'm going to use an example of like a community where there is a king.
I can't hear you, ma.
You can't? Mr. Sampson, can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly.
Ruth, can you hear me? Ruth. I think she's still trying to connect. Mrs. Eken, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? I'm sure it's from your own end. Like I was saying earlier, there are 5 elements of communication. The first one is the sender. I said I was going to use an example where there's a king in a community and the king needs to send a message. So in this instance, he is the sender. And the second element of communication is a message. The third element is channel. From the example that I'm giving, if the king sends a message, he sends that message through a town crier, and there needs to be a channel that the town crier will use to deliver the message, and most of the times it's usually a gong. When people hear the sound of a gong, they come out to listen to what the town crier has to say. The fifth element of communication is the receiver. When the message is being sent, obviously it needs to be received by someone or people. And then the fifth element of communication is called the feedback. Sometimes people give feedback and sometimes they just receive the message and end it there. But most of the times there's usually a feedback. The third objective we're going to look at is the traditional channels of communication in African societies. We have quite a number of them. The first one we're going to look at is called idiophones. Idiophones are self-sounding instruments that don't need any intermediary. Once you hit them, they make a loud noise. An example of an idiophone is a gong, where most of us know what a gong is. Another example is a bell, and then a rattle. The second traditional channel of communication in African societies we're looking at is called membranophones. These are musical instruments that produce sounds from vibrating the membranes. An example of this is called the talking drum. The talking drum is mostly used in the Yoruba land, either used to praise someone or to shame someone. Apart from the Yoruba land, there are other societies where the talking drum is used. The third traditional channel of communication in African society is called aerophones. Aerophones are musical instruments from the flute family. The first one, the first example I'll give is the whistle, reed pipe is the second one, and then the gourd horn. The one that I think we're all familiar with is the whistle. The fourth one we're going to look at, that's the fourth traditional channel of communication in African society we're going to look at, is called symbolography. Symbolography represents a symbolic writing that is used to convey a message. In some societies, when people put a leaf in front of a vehicle, it signifies that there is a corpse in that vehicle. And in some other societies, when people put leaves in between their leaves, it signifies that something bad has happened in the land. The fifth traditional channel of communication we're going to look at is called signals. A signal is a physical embodiment of message, which includes fire, smoke, gunshots, and cannon shots. In some societies, when people hear a gunshot, it signifies that the burial process of a prominent person is about to take place, or it warns them against imminent danger. When a white hawk is being seen flying around in some African societies, it signifies that the flood season is approaching. And then the last one I have here is when an eaglet is flying around in some societies, it communicates to them that there's a dangerous animal that is lurking around. The sixth traditional channel of communication in African societies we'll look at is called objectivities. Objectivities are objects that are used to convey specific meaning. For example, kola nuts. Where I come from, when a visitor comes to someone's house, we present kola nut, which means that you accept the visitor. In some other places, when the visitor comes in, they give the person water. That water signifies that they accept that visitor coming into their home. It's also a way of communicating. The seventh one we're going to look at is called color schemes. Color schemes explains the use of different colors to convey messages. In most societies, when people are wearing black, it signifies that they are mourning. So people don't need to ask them what's the issue. It just communicates to them. And when people are wearing white, most of the times it communicates to others that they are giving praises. Rafiat, please, can you mute yourself? Thank you. When people are wearing red, or there is a red piece of cloth somewhere, it usually communicates to others that there is danger. The next one we're going to look at is called, the next traditional channel of communication we're going to look at is called extra mundane activities. This is basically the communication between the living and the dead. It's not only Africans who do this, but people outside Africa also engage in this practice. There are some people who want to find out an information, and the person to give them the information is dead. And they still want to find out, and they go extra miles to get that information. It's a way of communicating too. The next one we're looking at, the next traditional channel of communication in African society is called symbolic display. Symbolic display are things people do consciously or unconsciously. For example, waving of hand. Mr. Charles, can you mute yourself? For example, waving of hands, smiling, sticking out of the tongue, or frowning. All those things, all those symbolic displays are ways of communicating to people. The last one we're going to look at is called music. We are all familiar with music. Music represents folk songs that can either be to praise specific indigents for what they have done or to shame the indigents. In summary, channels of communication brings people closer, it educates people, it enlightens people, and it entertains people. We have come to the end of lesson 1. I hope you learned one or two things from this lesson. We'll meet very soon for lesson 2. Do have a lovely weekend and enjoy the next class. Thank you very
Thank you, Mom.
much. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.